So I think that the secrecy and deceit is often the most destructive element of the addiction relationship. When I worked in my clinical practice, when there was addiction that was out in the open and humbly confessed and worked on, I think that is a much more tolerable arrangement than when you have a addict who's still actively lying, covering up, sneaking, betraying, minimizing, because then trust and safety continue to be very perilous. And I love the verse in Proverbs where it says, he trusts her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life. And I think that's the essence of a good marriage and a good relationship.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. Today, we are lucky enough to return to our conversation with Leslie Vernick. Leslie is a licensed counselor and coach and author of 7 books, including the nationally bestseller, The Emotionally Destructive Relationship. Leslie, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be back. Thanks.
And as I said last time, we're going to spend some time talking about this idea of emotionally destructive relationships. And just for those who may be joining us for the first time, Leslie, how would you define that emotionally destructive relationship, or some of the characteristics or the attributes of that?
Yeah, emotionally destructive relationship is a pattern of behaviors that have been repeated over and over in spite of your talking to someone or telling them that you don't like it, that feels dismissive, demeaning, demoralizing, devaluing, and controlling, so that you're getting smaller and smaller or more objectified in the relationship. You don't have a voice, you don't have a choice, you're not a person to love, you're an object to use. And that's a very destructive relationship for you and your physical health. You can get sick from the stress of that. I remember at an AACC event people walk up and down the aisles, and a lady came up to my book table and she whispered in my ear, and her husband was next to her, and she goes, my husband's a pastor, but I'm only 40 and I've already had a heart attack. How long do I have to stay? And it was just so sad to me that, she's this public figure, her husband's a public figure, and she's dying inside, and she could die early because her heart is breaking and her body stress is breaking down.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking about this from our last podcast. Are there some external indicators of this internal chaos that if I'm attending a church, I see couples in the pew, are there some indicators that someone may be in a very destructive relationship, even though it may be this secret that they're working really hard to keep?
Yeah, I think I've gotten a lot of calls from pastors or small group leaders who notice certain things, and they wonder if those are some of the signs. I think one of the things, if you notice isolation tactics, so that no, I can't go out, my husband won't let me. Oh, I have to ask him if I can go to the retreat. So all of a sudden she's delegated to the position of a child asking a daddy versus a wife who has equal say and equal power in the relationship. If she seems fearful around her husband, so for example, in small group, if you're in a small group and she kind of asks, like, can I talk? Those kind of things. Obviously, if you notice any bruises, if you see her over the years getting more and more diminished, more and more confused, like, I don't know what I think, I don't know what I feel, I don't know what's wrong, I just feel empty inside. Depression. One of the things that got me onto this whole subject of emotionally destructive marriages is when I was writing my 3rd book on depression. Most of my clinical practice was full of Christian women in emotionally destructive marriages who were clinically depressed. And so I was thinking, is the best we have to offer them medication and therapy? Mm-hmm. Is there other answers for these women? Then suck it up, because you have to do this to stay married to this destructive person or this addicted person. And that really, no, the answer is no. You have more work to do to get healthy and strong. And it may cost you your marriage, but God calls you to steward your life, to guard your heart above all else. And so I think that's really what got me on this whole subject professionally.
We've talked a lot about women And we also know in the work that we do that there are men who are in emotionally destructive relationships. In your work with them or your understanding of the situation, are there differences or similarities for men and women who are in destructive emotionally relationships?
I think the power differential, especially Christian, and when we're dealing with Christian men. So if a Christian man went into his pastor and said, my wife controls all the money. She doesn't let me, she gives me an allowance. I feel demeaned. Every time I try to make a decision, she puts me down. She wears the pants in the family. I can't imagine a pastor not saying, pull your pants up and be the man and do what you need to do because this is wrong.
Right.
But if a woman goes in and says those very same words to her pastor, oftentimes it's, you need to support him. He's the leader of your home. He gets the final say. The Bible says you need to submit. And so it's more about her actually feeding the monster. The more she gives in and tries harder to be everything he wants her to be, the more entitled and self-centered he becomes. And so it's absolutely the wrong advice, but it seems so Christian and biblical. It's what often happens.
Mm-hmm. One thing I would say in our conversation last time is what is so evident, Leslie, is that you love the scripture. And that really, I think, gives you a voice in the church that needs to be heard, that you can speak the language, of the Bible. And so when someone presents almost a reasoning or a case for this emotionally destructive relationship using the scripture, you have a voice that can really challenge that. And that, I think, is a great gift that you give to the women and to those that you work with, and specifically the pastors in the churches that you're talking to.
I appreciate you saying that because that's something that I believe that God has called me to do. And I think my time at CCEF really gave me an appreciation for language. And they use a language that I don't necessarily use, more of, gospel-y kind of talk that I don't quite think people get a hold of. But the Bible speaks really clearly about this issue. And so I do stay away from, in both my books on emotionally destructive marriage and emotionally destructive relationship, I stay away from any clinical terms. I don't talk about narcissism. I don't talk about borderline. I don't use any of those terms because I think the Bible's pretty clear on pride, selfishness. When you're ruled by those kind of things, you act in pretty destructive ways, deceit, wickedness, that those terms are there. And when you can describe those behaviors, and say, well, I don't know if it's narcissism or not narcissism, but when someone doesn't give someone a choice or a voice, the Bible calls it selfishness, not headship. Right? And to be able to be really clear about that.
I really appreciate that too, about your teaching and your writing, Leslie, because I do believe often in these destructive relationships, there is a fair amount of spiritual abuse going on as well. So the Bible, as you said earlier in our first podcast, is used with an interpretation that maybe be very isolated from other scriptures or other advice that we've been given biblically. And so I like your, just the fullness of where you pull scripture from all over the Bible, not just one particular isolated incident. And I think it's very helpful for women that are reading your work.
I think so too. And I think we need more women who do that, because I think, again, and this is a little off topic, but when we do our work with people, we think about what's a godly person. We want to, whether we're clinical, helping them with clinical problems, or we're just helping them with discipleship, our goal is to help someone grow up, right? To mature into their full potential as a human being. But what we've done with women is we have cut off one part of their growth. And what I mean by that is, if we think about the image of God being male and female, the image of God created male and female, he created them. So the image of God is masculine and feminine. And we talk about growing men up, and we would describe a godly man, we would have to use some feminine terms. We would have to say a godly man is humble, a godly man is loving, a godly man is compassionate, merciful. These are all feminine, more feminine qualities. When we talk about a godly woman in most traditional churches, they would never use any masculine. They would never say a godly woman is brave, she's decisive, she's courageous. They would never say that. They would use completely feminine terms. And so part of our goal in working with women who have embraced the feminine, but they have no masculine, they have no no. They have no no. The masculine is the no, not doing it. Masculine is having boundaries, it's being decisive. This is what I will do, this is what I won't do. And we really need to encourage her to develop that, as well as for the man to develop the, yes, I don't know everything. I need to be submissive. I need to be more humble. I need to be more teachable. And those are things that we are missing in the bigger church picture of maturity. And that leads to then these truncated, imbalanced relationships.
And even one of the ways that we talk about addiction occurs when we've lost our yes and we've lost our no. So we can't say no to the things that are robbing of life, and we're not saying yes to the things that bring us life. And recovery is reclaiming that yes and that no.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked last time about, we want to spend some time talking about the emotionally destructive relationship in the context of addiction. And as you know, Faithful and True, the focus of the work that we do, because of the work that Mark Laaser and Deb do, is with couples who are struggling with sexual addiction. So what do you see and what you've experienced in the relationship between addiction and the emotionally destructive relationship?
So I think that the secrecy and deceit is often the most destructive element of the addiction relationship. When I worked in my clinical practice, when there was addiction that was out in the open and humbly confessed and worked on, so the Galatians 6:1, you who are spiritually restored, such one in a spirit of gentleness. And there was a gentleness on the part of the person who was living with the addict, and there was a gentleness on the part of the addict saying, I need help. I don't have my yes. I've lost my yes, or I lost my no. I need help in getting that. I think that is a much more tolerable arrangement than when you have a addict who's still actively lying, covering up, sneaking, betraying, minimizing, because then trust and safety continue to be very perilous. And I love the verse in Proverbs where it says, he trusts her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life. And I think that's the essence of a good marriage and a good relationship.
I was wondering if you could talk with us about how you go about treating people that come to you who have identified emotionally destructive relationships. How do you begin? Do you work with both sides of the relationship, one side particularly? Tell us what you're...
Yeah, so I don't believe marriage counseling is the first step. So I don't do counseling anymore. I didn't relicense myself in Arizona, but we do coaching, and we work with only women now. So we wouldn't work with the addict, we would refer them to someone else. But when I did do it in Pennsylvania, I wouldn't do marriage counseling because I don't think you can repair the marriage until the addict is healthy and she has done her work. It's sort of like, if you have a sinkhole, if you have a crack in your foundation of your house because of a sinkhole, to fix the crack isn't fixing the problem, right? And so the addiction is kind of like the sinkhole. If you don't deal with the sinkhole and you try to fix the broken trust in the relationship and you haven't fixed the addict, it's going to create another sinkhole. And so to give someone hope that we're working on the marriage when the whole heart of the addict is still deceptive and sneaky, you're just creating more pain for the woman. So I just tell them straight out, marriage counseling isn't the first treatment plan we do. So that way, if the addict isn't really ready to come clean and really ready to do their own work, she's not getting false hope that, our marriage is going to be restored. She has to face reality that he's not interested in doing his work, because he'll say, I'll go to marriage counseling because he wants to blame her for everything, right? Like, if only she were more sexually available, if only she did it this way, if only she didn't do that, then I wouldn't watch this, or I wouldn't have had that affair. It becomes about her doing something that made him disappointed enough to go cheat. But that's not the real issue. So I think that's where we have to get really clear as clinicians or victims even, of saying, hey, marriage counseling isn't the first order of business, but I need work because I've been betrayed, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm deregulated emotionally, I need to heal my own trauma, and I need to get healthy enough to leave if I have to. And that's one of the things that we work with women. So we use an acronym CORE, C-O-R-E, to build some core strength. C, I'm courageously committed to the truth. Just like you said, you can't live in lies, even hopeful, positive fantasy lies. They're delusions. So C is, I'm courageously committed to truth. O, I'm going to be open to learning new things. I'm not going to isolate myself anymore. R, I'm going to be responsible for myself and respectful toward others without dishonoring myself. And this is a lot of work on setting boundaries, of learning to be self-aware, of understanding our body and what our intuition is trying to tell us, stewarding our life. When the Bible says, guard your heart above all else, it is the wellspring of life. Who's to do that if you don't? Who's to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ if you don't? And so those are things that we help women take responsibility. Instead of over-functioning and trying to fix the addict, and fixing his life, that's his responsibility. As much as you want to fix him, even if he wants you to fix him, you can't. Just like if a diabetic refused to eat right, they're in charge of their eating. You can help my cooking maybe, but they can still eat Doritos and drink beer at night and not tell you. So you can't fix someone's problem if they're not willing to work on their problem and own it. And so really helping her discern what's my side of the street and what's your side of the street. What do I need to get healthy with and what can I not help you with? Mm-hmm. And then the last one is really crucial in our work with women and victims, is to help them be empathetic. So C-O-R-E stands for empathetic and compassionate without enabling. Because I think it's so easy to get it bitter and resentful and still enable because you're afraid to have a good boundary. And so really helping them with that our step of being responsible, of identifying myself and what I'm willing to put up with and what I'm not willing to put up with, what I can live with and what I can't live with, what I'll tolerate, what I won't tolerate, what's good for me, what's not good for me. And that's not blaming him for anything. It's just saying, well, who am I? Mm-hmm. And then being empathetic. If you don't choose to do your work, I feel sad instead of angry that you're ruining my life. I feel sad for you, and really helping them have that compassion and empathy and not running in like their hero of their story. She can't fix his story. She can only fix hers.
You mentioned this idea of really, I think it's empowering women to know that they can leave, that is an option. If it continues to be destructive and not just hurtful, but harmful. Is that a difficult conversation? And do you find a lot of women, because of scripture that's been interpreted for them or the way they have been taught to believe something, that there is a resistance to divorce, so that leads them in this awful place of obligation to stay, but no desire to stay?
Right. Yeah, and I think there's an internal resistance for a couple of reasons. One is I'm afraid that God's going to send me to hell, and I'm going to be, my whole life is going to be ruined because I disobeyed God. So really helping educate women to look at the scriptures for themselves and discern what the Holy Spirit is really saying, showing them other scriptures where God really validated women. We think about that. I think it's a passage in Exodus 34 where it says, if you marry a slave wife, which is a woman in the lowest society of patriarchalness, a slave wife, if you marry a slave wife who has no rights at all, and you take a second wife and you ignore the rights of the first wife who really has no rights, she has the right to divorce you. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, if God cares about the lowest, the least of these and her rights as a woman, he certainly hasn't changed in the New Testament at all. And so to really understand some of those passages about relationship, God isn't asking women to fake and lie and pretend in order to stay legally married. That's not honoring or glorifying to him. And they have to wrestle through those scriptures and really develop that relationship with God where they can trust when he's saying, enough is enough already. It's time to go. And really being empowered to have that discernment, to have that judgment, to be able to make those decisions and knowing when and how to make those decisions. So I think there's that spiritual resistance, but I think there's also this emotional resistance that I think we also have to help women with, in that we've not taught women, us as mothers and other women, as well as men, to fully grow up. Fully growing up means you are capable of supporting yourself and taking care of yourself in every way. And I think in the Christian church, we have kind of created a fairy tale of, hey, you're going to get married and you're going to get homeschool your kids and you're going to be taken care of. And that's not reality anymore. And I think every female needs to be prepared to be a fully functioning adult when she is an adult. And that means also being able to work. And the Bible tells us that we need to be able to work and support ourselves. And a woman needs to do that. She can choose to stay home with her children if she wants to, but she's capable of working and having a job. And so there's a lot of women who have never done that. And it feels so overwhelmingly scary that they stay in destructive marriages because they're being taken care of. And that keeps them in an immature place, and it keeps them in a victim position or a powerless position, which disables them.
And do you see a difference maybe for the woman who has been betrayed sexually through addiction versus the woman who technically the husband is faithful sexually, but is also in this emotionally destructive relationship? Do you find the woman who's in that emotionally destructive relationship, it's much more difficult for her to find her voice to leave because, she doesn't have grounds for divorce?
Sometimes it really depends on some of that other internal stuff in the woman. So how much she's willing to give up her fantasy. because I think the idea of how my life was going to go. So we have some limiting beliefs, like I can't live alone, or I'll never, make it by myself, those kind of limiting beliefs. But we also have these limiting beliefs that, my life was going to look like this, and it's looking like this, and I don't like this. And so I'm resisting accepting that reality. And so I think part of our work with them is helping them to face reality, whether it's breast cancer, or whether it's a husband who doesn't treat her well, or a husband who cheats and treats her well. There's a lot of addict husbands who still want their wife there, and so they treat them well, as long as they don't confront them on the addiction and they let them be a tomcat on the side, they will treat them well. And so there's this internal dissonance, like, I have to give up my house, I have to give up all my stuff, I have to give up my status if I spill the beans on him. And yet I don't like this, and I know he really isn't loving me or himself or God, and yet we're both kind of living in a pretend world that's not true, and it's scared to rock that boat.
We talk a lot with the men about fantasies, and we often talk about the fact that all fantasies are a rescue fantasy. You want to be rescued from something, and you want to be rescued to something. And what you're identifying and alluding to is the role that fantasy can have for women. And those fantasies, just like the men, hold them hostage and don't allow them to live in the truth that sets them free.
And it also keeps them in the victim mindset, because when you need to be rescued, then you're not taking ownership of your life. Mm-hmm. And so whether you want, the woman on the screen to rescue you from your poor self-image, so she tells you you're wonderful because, she doesn't even know who you are, but she can tell you that, and that can rescue you from your fantasy. Or I'm afraid to step into my power as a woman and say no, because, I want to be rescued by the pastor who's going to speak up for me, right? And so I think there is this victim mindset that we are looking for, that, the Cartman triangle, and we're in the victim role, and we're looking for the rescuer, the overfunctioner, the person who's going to fix our life. And that's where we have to be really careful as people helpers and counselors. It's very easy to step into the hero role and tell them what to do and fix their life. And you know how that goes. It doesn't go very well, but that's what they want from us. And so it's really important for us to know our place, and it's undergirding them so that they can stand strong, not standing strong on their behalf.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say, I was wondering, Leslie, before we run out of time, if there are things in the future that you're working on, a new book perhaps, or anything else that you would love to share with us and our listeners today.
I have been so busy. I have a lot of books out there in just classes that we're teaching online. I haven't actually put them in a book form because it takes more work than I want to spend at this time of my life to do that. Yeah. But I'm doing a lot of classes. So there's a lot of free stuff on YouTube and a lot of free stuff on Facebook Live. But we have a 6-month coaching group that we do. It's a really powerful group called Empower to Change, for any woman who, and the curriculum there is a book. We also have a huge class on people pleasing if you're a woman who doesn't have much of a backbone. And those are books, but they're not in book form. They're more in the class format, but They can find them on my website.
Well, that's great. Those are great resources that we'd love to lead people to.
Well, as we conclude, one of the things that we do want and desire to leave with people is hope. So for the person out there that is in this emotionally destructive relationship that may be listening to us, what is the message of hope that you can offer them and leave with them?
So I'll use the story metaphor again. So every story has a victim, a villain, a hero, and a guide, right? Every story. And what you want to do with your story, you can't always control the plot. We think of stories like Gladiator, and he went through a hard time, and we think of Frozen, and they went through a hard time. And everybody in a story that's a good story goes through awful stuff in order to grow. And so as they go through these awful stuff and grow, and they become a different person through it, they become stronger, they become wiser, they become more compassionate, they become more resourceful. If you can keep that in your head while you're going through the pain, like James tells us, consider it all joy whenever you face these hardships, because they're meant for your growth. I think of that passage in 2 Peter where it says, God has given us everything we need for life and godliness. And sometimes when it's hard stuff, we say, I didn't need hard, but we need the sunshine and we need the rain, right? We need both in our life in order for us to grow. If you had all sunshine, everything would burn up. And so if we're not afraid of hard, even when we don't like hard, if we're not afraid of it, if we can walk through it, even if we need a trusted guide by our side to help us to do the right thing, we can create a different outcome to our story than would have been if we just stayed in the victim role and just let everything happen to us and just stay in our corner and lick our wounds. So I would just encourage anyone, whether they're the addict who's feeling helpless or the victim who's feeling helpless, that there's a purpose in this for you, and you can grow through this. You can become a much wiser, stronger. Think of the story of Joseph. I mean, he was victimized many times, and he became stronger and wiser, and God used everything in his life for a good purpose, and he will in yours too, if you cooperate with the process.
Well, thank you.
Great job, Leslie. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. And as we told our listeners on the last podcast, if you'd like to learn more about Leslie or have access to ordering her books, visit her website, leslievernick.com. And there you'll find lots of resources, lots of great information. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. We'd like to thank our listeners and our viewers for watching us. We now have the Faithful and True YouTube channel, and we invite you to visit it. Visit the channel, like us, subscribe if you will, please. And we hope that this coming week for you is going to be a week that's filled with many blessings and great vision.